The morning sun slipped through the curtains of Adana's apartment in Cape Coast as she poured herself a cup of steaming coffee. The sound of the waves outside usually brought her peace, but that morning felt different. She sat on her couch, scrolling through her emails half awake, when one subject line froze her: urgent legal notice. Her heart began to pound. She clicked it open, and as her eyes ran across the words, her whole world tilted. The email stated, in cold, professional language, that her father, Obinna, had finalized the sale of her $2 million beachfront cottage, the very house she had inherited from her late mother. It wasn't just any property. It was her sanctuary, her pride, the place she'd poured years of work, love, and money into restoring. At the bottom of the email was an attachment, a scanned image of a $10,000 check. No apology, no explanation, just a note saying it was her share. Adana stared at the screen, her coffee turning cold beside her. $10,000? That couldn't even cover the kitchen renovation she had done last year. Her hands trembled. She tried to breathe, but anger and disbelief filled her chest. How could he? This wasn't a mistake. This was betrayal. The man who had once taught her about honesty and legacy had sold away her future without even calling her. Adana set her cup down slowly, whispering to herself, "They really think I'll just accept this?" Her eyes hardened. The storm inside her had just begun. Adana gripped the steering wheel tightly as her car rolled slowly along the familiar coastal road. The air smelled of salt and wet sand, the same scent that had always reminded her of home. But today, the view ahead made her chest ache. Her beautiful beachfront cottage stood there, bright under the Ghanaian sun, but something was different. A large red "Sold" sign leaned against the front gate like a wound she couldn't ignore. She pulled over and sat quietly for a moment, watching the house that once held every piece of her childhood. Her heart thudded as flashes of memory filled her mind, her tiny hands scooping sand beside her father, Obinna, as he laughed and called her his little builder. She remembered the weekends when they painted the walls yellow, her favorite color, while her mother hummed soft highlife tunes in the background. The garden still looked the same, rows of tropical flowers that her mother had planted, their colors now faded but alive. Every corner of that house carried her mother's warmth, her laughter, her dreams. Adana stepped out of the car, her sandals sinking into the sand. She reached for the gate, but it was locked. The sound of waves crashing nearby made her eyes sting with tears. This wasn't just a house. It was the last piece of her mother she had left. Later that day, she drove straight to her father's house. Her siblings, Chaik and Neka, were lounging in the living room, scrolling through their phones like nothing had happened. Adana's voice trembled as she asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me about the sale?" Chaik barely looked up. "It's family business, Ada. Dad handled it." "Family business?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "That was my inheritance. Mum left it to me." Neka rolled her eyes and said, "You're overreacting. Dad said you'd understand once you calm down. It's just property. Just property." The words cut deeper than any blade. Adana's throat tightened as she pulled the $10,000 check from her purse and slammed it on the table. "This is what you think my home is worth? Everything Mum built, everything she left, reduced to this piece of paper?" Her father wasn't there, but she could already hear his voice in her head, calm, controlling, full of excuses. The kind that always made her question her own feeling. Not this time. She grabbed the check, stuffed it back into her bag, and walked out before the tears could fall. As she got into her car, she looked at the cottage one last time in her mind, the laughter, the love, the promise her father once made. One day, this will all be yours. Now it was gone, sold without a word. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Adana whispered to herself, "If they think this is over, they don't know me at all." Adana didn't bother knocking. She pushed open the heavy wooden door to her father's office, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ear. Obinna looked up from his desk, surprised for a moment, then leaned back in his chair with that same calm, commanding expression she had known all her life. The man who had once been her hero now looked like a stranger wearing her father's face. "So," Adana began, her voice trembling but fierce, "you really sold my cottage? Without telling me? Without even asking?" Obinna sighed and adjusted his glasses. "Adana, calm down. It's for your own good," he said smoothly, as if he were explaining something to a child. "You've never been practical. That property was wasting away. I made a decision." She took a step closer, her voice rising. "My property, the one Mum left to me. You had no right." Her brother, Chaik, who had been lounging on the couch scrolling through his phone, laughed under his breath. "Come on, Ada. It's just a house. Dad knows what he's doing." Adana turned sharply toward him. "A house? That's my childhood, Chaik. It's where Mum—" "Oh, please," Neka interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Don't start with the sentimental stuff. Dad gave you a check. Take it and move on." Adana's fingers curled into fists. "A check for $10,000? That's not even 1% of what the house is worth." Obinna stood, his voice firm but eerily calm. You're being dramatic, Adana. Money isn't everything. I've managed this family's assets for years. You wouldn't understand. She stared at him, her eyes filled with disbelief. You think I don't understand? I worked for that house. I rebuilt it. Every tile, every wall, every flower in that garden. I paid for it. With my savings, with my time, with my heart. Obina's face hardened. Watch your tone. You're talking to your father. Adana laughed bitterly. A father doesn't betray his child and call it love. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick, cold, uncomfortable. Even Chaik looked uneasy now. But Obina quickly regained his composure. You're emotional. You always were. This is business, Adana. You'll thank me one day. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. No, I won't, she whispered. And I'll make sure you regret underestimating. She turned and walked out before anyone could say another word. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway as she clutched her bag close, her hands shaking with rage. Outside, she paused by her car, breathing hard. The wind carried the smell of the sea, sharp and familiar, a reminder of what she had lost. But in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't broken. She was furious, focused, and ready. As she started the engine, one thought ran through her mind. They took what was mine once. But they'll never take it again. Adana sat at her small desk, her laptop open and a fresh cup of coffee beside her. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what had happened, and sitting around doing nothing was not an option. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. She started by calling a well-known real estate lawyer in Cape Coast, explaining the situation as calmly as she could. My father sold my property without my consent, she said, her voice steady even as her chest tightened. The lawyer listened, took notes, and promised to pull up all the relevant records. That call felt like the first step in climbing a mountain she hadn't planned to face. Next, Adana dove into public property records. She clicked through pages of deeds and transaction histories, her eyes scanning for anything unusual. It didn't take long to find discrepancies. The sale had been rushed, bypassing several legal steps that were supposed to protect owners like her. Her father had moved the property quickly into the hands of a developer in Accra, leaving her with nothing but a check that felt like an insult. The more she dug, the more she found. Emails from her father and her siblings, Chaik and Neka, revealed discussions about minimizing her role in family assets. They joked about how easy it would be to get Ada out of the way. Anger surged through her, but so did determination. Every word she read, every document she uncovered, added fuel to the fire burning inside her. Adana leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. This wasn't going to be easy. She wasn't just fighting a developer. She was fighting her own family, people who knew her weaknesses and hoped she would give up. She realized that winning this fight would require more than anger. She needed a plan, patience, and courage. She needed allies, evidence, and strategy. Her mind started forming a roadmap. Step 1. Gather everything official. Deeds, emails, any paperwork that proved her ownership. Step 2. Consult with her lawyer about the legal options. Step 3. Prepare for a public approach, one that would hold her family accountable without losing control of her own story. As she looked out the window at the glistening waves hitting the shore, a sense of clarity settled over her. She wasn't helpless, and she wasn't alone. The fight ahead would be long and exhausting, but for the first time since discovering the sale, she felt a spark of hope. Adana took a deep breath, rolled up her sleeves, and started typing emails to potential witnesses and contacts who could help her. Every document she requested, every phone call she made, was a step toward reclaiming what was rightfully hers. She whispered to herself, almost like a promise, I will not be silenced. I will not back down. I will get my home back. And with that, her journey had officially begun. Adana's phone buzzed on the table, and she saw Kwame's name light up the screen. Kwame had been a close friend of her mother and a trusted property consultant for years. He had helped manage the cottage when her mother was alive, and she knew he could be counted on to tell the truth. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed call. Adana, it's been a while, Kwame said warmly, though there was a seriousness in his voice as soon as she explained the situation. She quickly laid out everything, the sale, the $10,000 check, and the emails she had found showing her father and siblings conspiring behind her back. Kwame listened carefully, then leaned her through what he could do. Ada, the sale wasn't just wrong, it's illegal in several ways. There are documents missing, and the developer didn't follow proper protocols. We can prove that, but we need to act fast. I'll help you gather all the evidence you need, emails, contracts, property records. Once we have it, we can take legal action and expose the truth. Hearing Kwame's confidence made Adana feel a flicker of hope. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, she didn't feel entirely alone. But she also knew that fighting her own family would be emotionally draining. That's when she reached out to Amma, her childhood friend, who had always been a rock through the ups and downs of life. Alma met her at a small cafe by the beach. They hugged tightly, and Adana let out the frustration she had been holding in for weeks. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. Alma squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, Ada. We'll figure this out together. And remember, you're stronger than you think." With Kwame's guidance and Alma's emotional support, Adana started building a plan. Kwame went through the legal documents, identifying weaknesses in the sale and ways to challenge it. Alma helped her think through the public side, how to tell her story in a way that would be heard, without letting her family twist it. They agreed on careful steps: gather evidence, meet with lawyers, and then create a controlled public narrative to put pressure on her father and sibling. Word of the dispute started to leak subtly through friends and social circles. People began whispering about the betrayal and the $2 million cottage sold without Adana's consent. Adana could feel the tension building. It was viral in the sense that everyone around them was talking, sharing, speculating. The story was growing, and with it, a sense of accountability for her family. That night, Adana sat at her desk, looking over her notes and the emails Kwame had helped her organize. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. But she also felt unstoppable. She wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. She was fighting for justice, for respect, and for the memory of her mother. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small smile. With Kwame's knowledge and Alma's unwavering support, she knew this fight could be won, and the world was about to see it unfold. The community hall buzzed with chatter as neighbors gathered for the annual Cape Coast cultural event. Adana walked in quietly at first, letting the familiar crowd settle around her. She could feel the weight of weeks of preparation pressing on her shoulders, but she refused to let fear take over. Today, she would face her father, publicly, and demand answers. As Obinna stepped onto the stage to greet the crowd, smiling and waving as if everything was normal, Adana's heart raced. She waited until he finished his small speech and then raised her hand, calling for attention. "Excuse me," she said, her voice strong but controlled. The chatter died down instantly. All eyes turned toward her. "Dad," she began, her tone calm yet sharp, "how do you sell my home as if it's yours to give away?" The room went silent. A few whispers rippled through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, sensing the tension. Obinna froze for a split second, then tried to regain his composure. "Adana, this isn't the place." "No," she interrupted, her voice echoing through the hall. "This is the place. You betrayed me. You sold the cottage that belonged to Mum and me, and you thought a $10,000 check would fix everything? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Someone in the crowd pulled out a phone, and before she knew it, her confrontation was being recorded. Within hours, videos began popping up all over social media in Accra, and then across Ghana. Comments flooded in, some outraged, some sympathetic. People shared their own stories of family betrayal and shady business deals. Adana's story struck a nerve. Obinna, visibly uncomfortable now, tried to smooth things over. He gave a half-hearted speech about family decisions and good intentions, but his words sounded hollow against the evidence she had quietly prepared. Her calm, poised, and articulate manner made him look selfish and cruel. Neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads, some nodding in support. As the crowd began murmuring, Adana stepped down from the stage and walked through the hall. People reached out to her, offering words of encouragement. "You're brave," one woman said. "No one should ever treat their child that way." Her story wasn't just about a house anymore. It had become a symbol of standing up against injustice. Later that evening, Adana sat at home, scrolling through social media. Hundreds of shares, comments, and messages poured in. Her family's actions were under public scrutiny, and she had done it without losing her dignity. She felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with determination. This was only the beginning. Adana whispered to herself, looking at the screen. "They thought they could hide the truth, but I showed everyone who I really am. And I'm just getting started." The confrontation had gone viral, but more importantly, it had shown the world that betrayal could be challenged, and that one person's courage could inspire many. Adana sat in the front row of the courtroom, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her lawyer, a sharp and determined woman named Efua, leaned over to whisper, "We have everything we need, Adana. Emails, deeds, witness statements. You're in control here." Adana nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Today was the day she would officially fight for what was hers. The case was filed against her father, Obinna, and the developer who had purchased the cottage. The lawsuit detailed every irregularity in the sale, missing legal approvals, forged signatures, and deliberate attempts to exclude Adana from the process. Kwame had provided copies of old emails, contracts, and property records that proved her ownership. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The hearings were tense from the very beginning. Obinna sat across the courtroom, looking calm on the surface, but Adana could feel the intensity radiating. He tried subtle intimidation, leaning too close to witnesses, giving pointed glances, and whispering under his breath. During cross-examinations, he tried to twist the truth, suggesting Adana didn't understand property management or that she was overreacting. But Adana stayed composed. Every time her father tried to manipulate the situation, she leaned on her evidence, her lawyer's guidance, and her own growing confidence. Emails were read aloud in court, showing his schemes. Documents were presented, proving that she had been the rightful owner all along. The courtroom felt heavy with tension, but Adana's calm, prepared demeanor made her father's excuses sound weak and self-serving. Outside the courtroom, the story had already captured the public's attention. Local media covered the proceedings daily. Videos and articles shared her side of the story, framing Adana as a symbol for anyone who had been wronged by family betrayal or corrupt. People began sending her messages of support, sharing their own stories, and following each hearing with bated breath. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #JusticeForAdana and #StandUpForHeirs. Even though the trial was exhausting, long hours, tense exchanges, and endless legal jargon, Adana felt empowered. She realized that this wasn't just about reclaiming a house. It was about standing up for herself and proving that no one could take her dignity, her mother's legacy, or her inheritance without consequence. After a particularly intense day of testimony, Adana walked out of the courthouse and felt the warm sun on her face. People nearby whispered words of encouragement. Some even clapped quietly, showing solidarity. She smiled, knowing she had already won in a way, by refusing to be silenced, by turning her pain into power, and by making the world see the truth. Every day in court brought her closer to justice, and she knew that no matter what obstacles her father or the developer threw in her path, she would not back down. This fight was hers, and she was ready to see it through to the very end. Adana woke up early that morning with a sense of quiet victory. Her lawyer had just called to confirm that the court had granted temporary injunctions, stopping the developer from taking full possession of the cottage. It wasn't the final win, but it was a start, a small but crucial step toward reclaiming what was rightfully. She felt a spark of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. With this legal backing, Adana turned her attention to the public side of her battle. She began carefully documenting the story of the cottage, the love her mother had poured into it, the renovations she had overseen, and the betrayal by her own family. She wrote posts, filmed short videos, and shared photos of the property as it had been, highlighting her mother's original intentions and the emotional and financial labor she had invested over the years. Each post was personal, raw, and authentic, showing the world that this fight wasn't just about money. It was about family, justice, and legacy. Almost immediately, the campaign began to gain traction. Influencers in Accra shared her story, journalists picked up the posts for news coverage, and legal advocacy groups reached out, offering advice and support. People resonated with her honesty and determination. Comments poured in from strangers sharing their own stories of family disputes, theft, and betrayal, creating a wave of empathy and solidarity around her. Of course, her siblings didn't stay quiet. Chaik and Neka started posting online, trying to discredit her claims and paint her as over-emotional and dramatic. But every attempt to undermine her backfired. Adana's posts were backed with clear evidence: emails, property records, photos, and witnesses, leaving her family's attacks looking weak and dishonest. The more they tried to smear her, the more people rallied behind her. Her calm, collected approach made her story go viral, and she became a symbol for anyone who had been wronged by betrayal in their own family. Every day brought small victories. A local radio station interviewed her, asking her to share her side of the story. A popular Instagram page reposted her videos, reaching thousands more across West Africa. Each share, each comment, each supportive message reinforced her determination. She could feel momentum building, and she knew the combination of legal strategy and public support was powerful. That night, Adana sat at her desk, reviewing the latest messages from supporters and planning her next posts. She smiled faintly as she realized something important. This fight was bigger than just reclaiming a house. It was about setting an example, about showing the world that courage, evidence, and persistence could overcome even the closest betrayals. She whispered to herself, feeling a surge of strength. They may have underestimated me, but now everyone knows. I'm ready for the next step, and nothing can stop me. After months of tense court battles, the day finally came. Adana sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding, as the judge read the decision. Every eye in the room was on her, but all she could feel was a mix of relief and triumph. The judge ruled in her favor. The sale of her $2 million beachfront cottage was annulled, and she regained full ownership. The developer would be compensated legally, as the law required, but her father and siblings faced the weight of public scrutiny for their betrayal. Adana stepped out of the courthouse into the warm Ghanaian sun, feeling like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Reporters were waiting, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. She spoke with calm authority, explaining that the fight had never been about money alone. It had been about justice, family legacy, and protecting what was rightfully. Her words resonated, and social media lit up with support and admiration for her courage. Hashtag Justice for Adana was trending again, and this time, it was a celebration. Back at the cottage, Adana began renovations, determined to make it even more beautiful and meaningful than. She added touches that honored her mother's memory. Bright tropical flowers in every corner, freshly painted walls in cheerful, warm colors, and modern amenities that made the house luxurious but still welcoming. More importantly, she envisioned a space that could give back to the community, a place where neighbors and friends could gather for celebrations, workshops, or simply to enjoy the beauty of the coast. When the renovations were complete, Adana planned a grand reopening event. Invitations went out to neighbors, supporters, journalists, and even local officials. On the day of the event, the air buzzed with excitement. People wandered through the gardens, admired the restored rooms, and shared in the joy of the moment. Cameras captured every smile, every handshake, every word of congratulations. Standing on the balcony overlooking the waves, Adana took a deep breath and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had fought against betrayal, manipulation, and even her own family's attempts to silence her. Yet here she was stronger, more resilient, and generous. She had reclaimed not only a house but her dignity, her mother's legacy, and the trust in herself to stand up for what was right. As the sun dipped into the horizon, casting golden light over the beachfront, neighbors and friends raised glasses in her. Adana smiled, waving to the crowd, feeling gratitude and quiet pride. This was more than a victory. It was a statement that courage, patience, and integrity could overcome betrayal, and that even the deepest wounds could be transformed into something beautiful and lasting. In that moment, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning. My home, my story, my legacy. No one will ever take them from me again." Adana's story spread like wildfire across Ghana and beyond. Videos of her confrontation with her father, clips from the courtroom, and photos of her beautifully restored cottage were shared across social media, news websites, and even TV programs. People admired her courage, her intelligence, and the way she stood up for what was right. Her story inspired countless discussions about inheritance rights, family betrayal, and the importance of protecting one's legacy. Influencers, journalists, and legal advocacy groups amplified her message, turning Adana into a symbol of strength for anyone facing similar struggles. With her victory secured, Adana took steps to make sure her family's properties would be safe for generations to come. She set up a trust in her mother's name, a legal structure designed to protect family assets from exploitation or unfair decision. The trust would ensure that future generations could enjoy the home and property without fear of betrayal or manipulation. This move was more than legal strategy. It was a way to honor her mother's memory and create lasting security for her family. One evening, after the reopening celebrations and media interviews had settled, Adana stood alone on the balcony of her restored cottage. The golden light of sunset reflected off the waves crashing against the shore. She took a deep breath, feeling the salty breeze on her face, and smiled. The journey had been painful, exhausting, and full of betrayal, but she had emerged stronger than ever. "They underestimated me," she whispered softly, her voice carried by the wind. "I didn't just survive, I thrived." In that moment, Adana felt a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. Her home was safe, her mother's legacy protected, and her story had inspired countless others to stand up for themselves. She wasn't just reclaiming a house. She had created a legacy of courage, resilience, and hope that would continue long after the waves had washed the sand along her beloved coast.